Astartes, whether you're jumping into Space Marine 2 for the first time or looking to get that tactical edge in PvP, understanding the nuances of each and every class in their respective game modes is critically important. And as always, that's where we come in. My name is Kodiak, this is Legacy Gaming, and today we're breaking down every class and ranking them in both PvE and PvP. First things first, specifically for new players. If you're just working through the campaign, that's only a small portion of the game, and you won't come into contact with any class-based gameplay until you dive into Operations or PvP, both of which have separate long-term progression systems. Today we'll be ranking every class from S to F tier for both PvE and PvP, giving you our rationale as to why we think each class deserves the ranking that they do. In Operations, we have max leveled every character, upgraded every weapon to Relic tier, and completed everything on the hardest difficulty. In PvP, we're close to maxing out our rank and top the leaderboards time and time again in every game mode. It's not a flex, we have simply spent hundreds of hours with this game ahead of and during its launch. As always, with any sort of tier list analysis, you are free to disagree with us, and I'm sure many of you will. Keep it civil and let us know why you agree or disagree in the comments below, and we can keep the conversation going long after the video is over. With that all said, let's get to it. The Tactical is a class that has a massive amount of flexibility, both in terms of their weapon options and sheer potency of their class perks. Auspex Scan is one of, if not the strongest utilities in the game, allowing you and your team to amplify all damage by nearly 3 times their normal amount. There is no other class in the game capable of augmenting themselves and their team's damage to this level, which becomes invaluable at higher difficulties against tankier enemies and bosses. Just look at the Hive Tyrant from the Decapitation mission. If you Auspex that target and toss a Melt-A-Bomb onto the boss, you'll easily delete 75% of its health in one go. Being able to entirely skip boss phases or outright kill a boss with this ability combination will prove invaluable as more difficult content is added to the game. When it comes to weapons, not only does the Tactical have access to easily the best weapon in the game, the Melter Rifle, but it also has potent options such as the Bolt Rifle with Grenade Launcher and the Plasma Incinerator, allowing the class to flex into close range, mid-range, and even long-range roles on a team. Combined with the Emperor's Vengeance perk, you have infinite ammo sustain on any primary weapon, meaning not only are you prepared for any fight, you're also taking away less resources from your team. Finally, the Tactical comes with 3 armor nodes by default, the highest currently available in PvE. And given your weakness of not really having any sort of mobility or aggro drop, it allows you to take a few more hits before you need to worry. Overall, the PvE version of the Tactical checks nearly every box in its current state of the game, while having next to no downsides, so we can't find any rank more fitting than S tier. On the PvP side of things, since perks across your class and weapons don't exist, rankings definitely shift around. One of the most important factors, in our opinion, that makes for a high-ranking class in PvP involves mobility. Being able to disengage from or engage into a fight on a different axis is so strong in this game that classes able to leverage that pull way ahead of more traditional classes. The Tactical, unfortunately, is not one of those classes, and it becomes very apparent very quickly at a high level. With no defensive options, getting jumped by an Assault, Vanguard, or Cloaked Sniper will often lead to your death, more often than not. Even though the Tactical is the only class able to carry 2 equipment charges, and make no mistake, the Shock Grenade's blind effect is an incredibly potent tool, but if you at any point don't have one, you have no way to win a fight started by any of those 3 aforementioned classes. The Tactical is a class where you need to be hyper aware of your positioning and where enemies can be potentially coming from. Thankfully, Auspex Scan assists with this, as it provides not only a fantastic way to amplify damage against marked enemies, but it also gives you invaluable scouting information, revealing cloaked enemies and letting you often apply the first instance of damage on a target in an engagement. It also works as a highly effective zoning tool when used preemptively. Any enemy walking into it will not only be visible, but will make them much more hesitant to push into an area or peek a corner. This gives your team valuable information and allows everyone to set up the perfect preemptive defense when holding points. Auspex is then further leveraged by the Tactical's massive weapon variety, all of which performs really well in PvP compared to their PvE counterparts. The Marksman Carbine in particular gives the tactical insane pinpoint accuracy at range, enabling that zoning mid to long range playstyle. However, even with all of this to consider, you still can't ignore our initial point that the class is unable to move around maps effectively and can't escape from bad engagements, and really has no way to initiate a fight either because of how apparent Auspex is when used. Because of all that, we rank the tactical in PvP a B tier. On paper, the Assault would certainly seem like a class that could excel given the proper tools. It has a solid selection of perks to choose from and build around. Zealous Blow allows your jump pack to almost always fully refund upon slamming down into an entire group of low-tier enemies, and that feels insanely good, being able to take out massive amounts of threat for your team without expending a single bullet. This, however, is where the positives stop. Let's start with the weapons. Given that you are in melee range of enemies almost exclusively, you'd think your damage, especially with the Thunder Hammer, would be able to quickly deal with threats to avoid you losing your entire armor pool and a chunk of health per swing. Sadly, this isn't the case, and somehow the Thunder Hammer does less damage to enemies than weapons like the Melter Rifle or Las Fusil, both of which allow the player to also keep their distance. There's also an animation locking issue, which in order to get off some of the most powerful melee attacks often has you stuck in an animation, forcing you to lose massive amounts of armor and health, which feels really bad when a major or extremis enemy abruptly targets you during that time. Additionally, after experiencing the jump pack in the campaign and PvP, it performs so wildly different in operations to the point it actively feels bad to use. For one, having only 2 charges that recharge insanely slow means that perks that refund your charge on a perfect dodge with said jump pack feel awful, given how tight that window is. You want to use your jump pack dodge to move fluidly at or away from threats, but if you do, you lose your main source to regenerate that jump pack. Once your jump pack goes on cooldown all the way, you then legitimately feel helpless. Even bringing this class's charges up to 3 like its PvP counterpart would help immensely. To add to that, the removal of the hover and weapon functionality in the air is a baffling decision, as even simply being able to toss a grenade from an optimal vantage point or shoot down at an elite before just drop slamming onto them would feel incredible. All things considered, the Assault is the class easily in the worst state of balance. Because of that, we feel the PvE version of the Assault deserves to be placed in the D tier. When it comes to PvP, on the other hand, the Assault is a different beast entirely. For those that are unaware, melee damage in PvP bypasses armor entirely. This means even if a Bulwark or 2 are sitting on a point with banners up, any melee attacks completely invalidate that benefit and go straight to their health pool. This reason alone already elevates Assault to one of, if not the best, at dealing with those pesky entrenched bulwarks and heavies. Let's of course talk about why. In PvP, your jump pack having 3 charges that recharge quite fast allows the Assault to have insane mobility. Need to get to a point well ahead of everyone else? You can do that. Need to get into a team's backline unnoticed? You can do that too. The list goes on and on. Whether it's being aggressive or defensive, the Assault has, without question, the best mobility in the game. Now, I bet a good handful of you will ask, how is this possible? I'm always getting shot out of the air. On the offensive front, Assault players should be scoping out the layout of an engagement before jumping. If you're the first one a team sees, you're going to get popped immediately and provide 0 contribution to your own team, no questions asked. Instead, peeking around corners and watching for their attention to be elsewhere is paramount to your success. This allows you to take to the sky, a place enemies aren't often paying attention to when they're already fighting, allowing you to pick out your perfect area to bring down death from above. This can disrupt groups entirely, and if you manage to land right on 1 or 2 players, a follow-up melee strike or 2 will immediately kill them. While in the air, you can also deploy shock grenades at your target location, or a target off in the distance that would otherwise clean you up, ensuring the enemies that are an immediate threat to you are momentarily blinded, making the kills that much easier. The jump pack also allows you to get to positions on ledges above players, where they aren't expecting to look, letting your heavy bolt pistol put in serious work. Defensively, you can use your jump pack charges to dash around the ground. You can escape nearly any player this way who might be pursuing you, but you can also easily chase down fleeing players with this and a well-placed pommel strike. With this class, positioning is everything, and when used to its fullest potential, the Assault can be the single reason your team wins their engagements. Yes, you are super susceptible to being picked off in the air with only 2 armor nodes, and when your jump pack is down momentarily, you don't want to be caught in the middle of a skirmish because you will die. These negatives, however, are completely nullified through smart, tactical play, and when done correctly, you simply can't be challenged. For that reason, we easily rank the Assault as an A tier in PvP. I'm about to say something crazy here. The Vanguard is one of the best classes to have on your PvE team in the game's current state. Still with me? Alright, here is why, and genuinely, it's because of just 2 things. For one, the class can run with a familiar weapon, the Melta Rifle. This weapon is honestly insane, and not in a, gee, I hope this thing gets nerfed kind of way, but in a, this weapon gives me that power fantasy I crave. Let's bring everything else up, please. Even though you don't have the benefit of infinite ammo like the tactical does, you don't need it, because the weapon does its job of eliminating your biggest issues in the game, densely packed hordes of low-tier enemies. Once those are dealt with, the entire Majoris and higher experience becomes a game of parrying and gun striking. If you do take damage, the Melta Rifle will often over-heal you when you have contested health because it seems to be restoring 20% per kill per shot with it. What you end up with is infinite health sustain, insane horde clear, and a class that excels when dodging and parrying in close quarters. Couple that with the fact that the Vanguard has one of the best, if not the best, team perks in the game, Inner Fire. This allows your squad members to restore 15% of their ability charge simply by performing finishers. This means bosses, elites, and even trashed enemies will give you back a massive 15% of your ability. Classes like the Bulwark, Tactical, and Heavy can really make use of this since their class abilities benefit the entire team. Having them up almost constantly just by performing executions just lets you profit even more. Lastly, the Grapnel Launcher lets you get to pesky elites in the distance or up on cliffs, allowing you to jump to entire groups of them and swiftly deploy something like a Melta Bomb to clean up a whole group within seconds. We give this class a solid A ranking in PvE simply because we'd like to see more perks and weapons become really viable options on this class with higher difficulties and a horde mode coming in the future. Ready for a controversial take in regards to PvP? We don't think the Vanguard is that good. At first glance, especially with the game just recently launching, we've seen people complaining over and over about the Grapnel Launcher stunning its target, making the class easy win mode. I think initially, with a whole host of inexperienced players and players by and large having that solo lone wolf mentality, they set themselves up to be easily picked off by the Vanguard. In that regard, yes, the Grapnel Launcher is strong and will allow the Vanguard to quickly follow up his stun with a few quick shots to your head to end you. As soon as players play as a team, however, it's rare Vanguards can land those final shots, let alone finish his Grapnel attack before being swiftly gunned down. Grapnel locks you in place, and any set of players even remotely paying attention will see the Vanguard coming from a mile away. Even still, this ability does work well to expose bulwarks to a team focus firing them, so keep that in mind. Now, the Grapnel Launcher isn't all bad. On the terrain front, you can achieve positions with higher vantage points that the enemy team often aren't paying attention to, giving you excellent engagement opportunities with some decently potent ranged weapons. The hit collision on these terrain pieces does leave a lot to be desired, and if you don't grapple to the exact spot high enough on the wall to drop down onto the ledge below, you'll often completely miss your vantage point and waste a charge. Defensively, this ability can also get you out of some pretty hairy situations by grappling away, but again, if enemies are even remotely close to you when you do so, the locked grapple and dismount animations give enemies plenty of time to finish you off. It also doesn't help that you only have 2 armor pips just like the sniper, making you vulnerable to ranged damage if you play carelessly at all, with less of an instant way to disengage from that mistake. Believe it or not, we think the Vanguard can use a buff in PvP. We'd love to see the Vanguard able to mantle up ledges when grappling to them, allowing for a much smoother range of movement to engage and disengage from enemies. Regardless though, for all of those reasons, we give the Vanguard a B tier ranking in regards to PvP. Alright, on to the Bulwark in PvE. In the right hands, the Bulwark is capable of standing its ground, creating electrified choke points and providing your team behind you a clumping of enemies to focus fire down. You have several perks that lean into shock damage, really the class's only way to effectively build for the overwhelming amount of enemies being thrown at you in higher difficulties. But overall, the Bulwark really lacks a lot of other viable perks to diversify its build potential. The Bulwark's class ability, Chapter Banner, can often be the saving grace for teams in a run for several reasons. Not only is it a great point to rally around as soon as your armor starts getting removed, but through the perk Invigorating Icon, slamming down a banner will grant maximum contested health to all squad mates in the AoE. This effectively makes the Bulwark the only class in the game that's capable of negating the need for stim kits, allowing teammates to fully heal off executions or bursting down a large group of enemies shortly after banner is activated. All other choices in this class perk tree pale in comparison to this build direction, and it's certainly something that brings the overall enjoyment down. That being said, combined with having access to the incredibly potent Plasma Pistol, the Bulwark makes for an excellent support class. Unfortunately, it still suffers a bit from attacking in melee range, just like the Assault, as your attacks don't quite feel strong enough. However, if you're doing your job being the anchor your team needs in larger horde situations, then the Bulwark comfortably sits high in the B tier. This doesn't make it bad in our opinion, just other classes can be far more aggressive and still remain safe in the current state of the game, making a Bulwark less essential than it really should be. Every team in PvP, in our opinion, needs an anchor to play around, and the Bulwark is absolutely that class. While it is possible to absolutely pop off and style all over other players with the class, more often than not, it's a class better suited to locking down a point and drawing enemy fire, while your team benefits from that distraction. By continuously blocking with your shield, you're able to absorb nearly any instance of damage thrown your way. And when a teammate positions themselves behind you, the Bulwark can be a real challenge to dislodge. Knowing when to lower that guard to fire off a few rounds from your sidearm or dodge into a follow-up melee attack goes a long way to mitigating threats piling up in front of you. Then, as soon as your armor or a teammate's armor is depleted, your rally banner provides an excellent way for teammates to take cover momentarily before re-engaging. However, your weakness definitely shows in melee, despite being a melee-focused class. If you aren't proficient in parrying enemy attacks and retaliating with quick follow-up strikes, you will get killed insanely fast by other bulwarks or heavies. This again is because of the fact that armor does not mitigate melee damage at all. Additionally, shock grenades are a bulwark's bane. They disorient you, make you take constant damage while in their field, and allow almost any class to get behind you where they can deliver a burst of damage via their ranged or melee weapons. The same also applies to a Vanguard's grapnel launcher, exposing you to all range damage for a brief time, but this can be a non-factor in a coordinated team. Overall, we don't think this class has the most exciting gameplay, but its role on a battlefield can't be undervalued. A good Bulwark can quite literally be the difference in securing a win through holding points or keeping teammates alive. But the key here is playing as a team, not a lone wolf. For all these reasons, we think the Bulwark sits comfortably in the A tier when it comes to PvP. Every team can benefit from at least one. I think it's time we talk about the sniper in PvE, and aside from the tactical, this in our opinion is the best class in the game. When it comes to genuinely making high-tier operations easier for your entire team, the sniper easily leads on that front, particularly when using the las fusil. Why the las fusil? Well, it basically is a long-range melta rifle in terms of its potency, capable of clearing entire groups of low-tier enemies while refunding you on ammo. You can also eliminate entire packs of elite enemies before they even engage your team, conserving your entire team's resources from health to ammunition. Now take that a step further and combine the class with the tactical, and this process becomes even more deadly and efficient, to the point you will almost never have to deal with a challenging fight. The sniper also has one of the most potent team perks in the entire game, Squad Renewal. Any headshot kill by any squad member instantly restores 10% of their ability charge. It's not uncommon for classes in a party with a sniper to chain abilities back to back, and that includes the sniper's cloak ability. And let's pause and talk about cloak for a second. This not only is a way to supercharge your damage, oftentimes allowing you to take out half of a boss's health bar with one shot, but it's also the game's only form of aggro drop. With so many perks making this ability recharge faster or proc for free, if ever you are in a bad situation, you almost always have a defensive option to save yourself and even revive teammates. Genuinely, the only downside this class has is the fact that the other weapons available to it are so far below the potency of the las-fusil that you may as well never use them. But honestly, who cares? This class, where it currently sits, is an obvious S tier, right behind the tactical. In most cases, classes seem to go either up or down multiple tiers compared to their PvE counterparts, but the sniper is the exception. I'm not going to bury the lead here. The sniper is easily the best class in PvP, and it isn't even a contest. This is the only class both Livid and Tragic could consistently do high double-digit numbers in kills and objectives while maintaining low, sometimes even zero deaths because of two things available to the sniper: the bolt carbine and the camo cloak. While the sniper's ranged offerings are all able to be used effectively, depending on a player's playstyle, the bolt carbine by far is the best weapon in the sniper's toolkit. On other classes where enemies can see you coming, the weapon is mid at best, but in the hands of a character able to make themselves effectively invisible for a short period of time, it may as well be the strongest weapon in the game. By timing your cloak activation to quickly sneak behind enemy players and immediately uncloak, you not only conserve a massive amount of your ability charge, but you're then able to unleash a full magazine from the bolt carbine to that player's back or head, almost always killing them before they have time to even react. No matter the situation, the common theme is always going to be, if you're spotted, cloak allows you to still surprise your enemy, and that initial spike in damage before they can do anything will almost always win you a duel. On the defensive side of things, especially when contesting points, cloak and shock grenades let you threaten any player pushing in, buying your team a ton of time to regroup on the point, but also allowing you the ability to slip away and heal if necessary. There should be very few times as a sniper in PvP where you actually die over using your cloak to simply disengage and reset. The only downside we've come across is that you only have 2 armor pips, which means oftentimes range damage will dip into your health pool even if you're reacting quickly. This does make it harder to survive against stacked groups, but you should be dictating the terms of engagement and picking off players that separate even slightly from the larger group. So, as you might have guessed, when it comes to PvP, the sniper is without a doubt an S tier pick, and every team should have 2 of these running around disrupting the enemy team. Last but certainly not least, we have the heavy, and I think our argument for this class's rank might surprise a lot of you. Let's start with class ability. Iron Halo provides incredible range damage mitigation to your team. When active, not only does it absorb entire Carnifex or Zoanthrope range volleys, but it also grants a flat 10% resistance to range damage within 50 meters to all squad mates. Couple that with the team perk Encompassing Aegis, granting another 20% damage mitigation from ranged attacks, and the heavy makes your entire team take 30% less range damage just by existing. I don't know about you personally, but range damage, in our opinion, is the game's biggest threat, especially in chaos missions. Additionally, when active, you can make all squad members' abilities regenerate 50% faster, while also making everyone deal 10% more damage. When Iron Halo is on cooldown, you deal 15% more damage, so you quite literally spam the ability off cooldown to juggle your respective buffs. In terms of weapons, even if the Heavy Bolter would feel better with its damage further increased, overall your available weapons all deal substantial damage across the board and are all viable. One in particular stands out, the Multi-Melta. It's essentially the Melta rifle, but better. It hits harder, fires faster, and even has its own dedicated perk in your class tree that restores 1 ammo every time you kill 5 enemies with a single shot. So basically, hordes are free to burst down, which is great. The class overall synergizes insanely well with others like the Tactical and the Vanguard, and even when you yourself run low on ammo, you still have access to the Plasma Pistol, arguably the strongest secondary in the game currently. Now, how about downsides? Well, if you have a completely absent-minded team, getting swarmed sucks when using anything but the Multi-Melta can often leave you struggling to regain ground, and overall, other perks on the Heavy, besides the ones we pointed out, lack much build customization. Is that enough to really tank the class's overall ranking? No, which is why we think the Heavy in PvE is very deserving of an A tier ranking. Finally, let's talk Heavy in PvP. While the Iron Halo is a versatile and essential tool in PvE, in PvP it serves one purpose: stop projectiles from hitting you and your team. In a one-on-one duel, most of the time this can be leveraged so you can squeak out the win against 1 or 2 opponents. In larger engagements, however, with the barrier being so wide, there are so many angles it can be shot from without you having line of sight on your target, and more often than not, this barrier will get burned down with you dying very soon after. It really depends how and when you deploy it to make it an effective tool, but overall we do think the durability is very low. It also doesn't help that one of the Heavy's absolute weaknesses is in melee combat. Yes, you have access to the multi-melta once you rank up enough, and this weapon is truly what you should be using when defending points, as it covers most of your weaknesses. However, as soon as any enemies get past your frontal cone of fire, you are as good as dead on this class most of the time. Your weapons take more time than other classes to really get set up in heavy stance to maximize their effect, and when in that stance, you are even more vulnerable to enemies getting close to you. Even still, once you get the multi-melta, dislodging you from a point that has any sort of cover becomes very difficult, especially since the Heavy has an armor class of 4. We don't think this is a bad class in the right hands and the right team coordination, but it's a much more reactive class than a proactive class, so for those reasons, we think the Heavy ranks solidly in the B tier. Well, you did it. You held on throughout the entire video of PvE and PvP rankings. Well done. If you enjoy these types of deep dives, do me a solid, hit that thumbs up, and consider subscribing. Like I said in the intro, it takes hundreds of hours to put these types of videos together, so support the channel. As always, my name is Kodiak, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching, and play on.